Welcome to Radio Dolby 89.6 FM. Thanks for joining us tonight. If you're listening, things are slightly better here at Radio Dolby this week. I got another letter from my brother Dolby. I'll read it for you now. He says, "Dear Dylan Dolby, my lovely brother, I'm missing you. Things didn't work out where I was. I'm no longer married and I'm no longer doing the herding thing. I've moved to the coast and I'm fishing. I can't remember the name of the country I'm in, but I've sent you some music and I hope you can use it on the show." Speaking of the show, coming up in a moment, we've got in the studio the fabulous Dave Edwards to talk about his travelling and an amazing career and knowledge of music. We've got some Wayne Hill and the amazing Quint. And at some point in the show, probably towards the end, I go fishing with Drew Dolby, but not really with Drew Dolby. It's just me pretending Drew Dolby is with me. I know it's a bit crazy, but at the end of that piece, we do a bit of music together, and I hope you enjoy it. I feel a little bit embarrassed by it, but anyway, let's get on with an ad, and then we're straight in. I think Dave Edwards is due here any second soon. Do you ever, find yourself sitting around at home, a Wednesday night watching TV on the couch and going, man, I should be doing something different, pushing life out there a bit more? Well, it just so happens that the Dolby City Folk Society, we meet on the first Wednesday of every month, and you can welcome to come along and grab an instrument and come and just get folk with all of us on a Wednesday. Get off the couch and just feel the intense simplicity and beauty of acoustic folk music right here in Dolby City. Wednesday nights, first of the month.
Do you want to travel deep? Beyond the crust and mantle to the solid iron core? Then grab your shovel and join us on Radio Dolby 89.6 FM.
That was Dave Edwards with a track called Lake Rotoiti to Fox Glacier from his album titled Electric Yang, Acoustic Yin. And I am extremely lucky to have Dave Edwards right here in the studio here in Dolby City. And Dave, I have to ask you about that trip you took in the South Island. It must have been quite a trip, quite a story.
Good, thanks Dylan. Electric Yang Acoustic Yin is a double CD which I released at the end of 2023. It was kind of a anniversary present to myself to mark 25 years of recording as Fifth Dimension, and hopefully to give listeners a starting point. There's an acoustic and an electric disc. That particular piece, Lake Rotoiti to Fox Glacier, was originally recorded in 2006 for an album called South Island Sessions. I was living in Nelson at the time, and Lake Rotoiti is one of the lakes in Nelson Lakes National Park. I also visited the West Coast a few times, including Franz Josef and Fox Glaciers. So the idea of the piece was to evoke the landscape. It starts off with a splash of a rock thrown into the water, and there's the sound of a tui and me playing the banjo, and then it crossfades to the electronic glitch noise, which is meant to represent the river of ice grinding its way through the rock, the power of the glacier. The noise was created by Damien Stewart, my collaborator on that track. He records electronica under the name Frey, and for that piece he was using a no-input mixing desk. So that's where the output of a mixing desk is plugged into the input, and then he plays with the knobs to manipulate the feedback sound. Damien was last seen in Europe, living in Austria. I haven't seen him for a long time. But the previous year we'd collaborated in Wellington in the Ascension Band. That was a 18-piece punk orchestra.
Okay, so an 18-piece punk orchestra. Please tell me more.
Ascension Band ran from 2003 to 2005 in Wellington. It was named after the John Coltrane album. It shows the influence of jazz and improvised music on what I was doing. I was invited to put together something for the Meatwaters Festival at the venue Happy, and I'd always wanted to play in a big band with electric instruments. Secondly, I wanted to bring together professional musicians to collaborate with self-taught punks like myself. Unlike a lot of the jazz players, I didn't have a music degree or hadn't studied music at school or anything like that, so the music had to be simple enough for someone like me to play. There was a shifting lineup with a lot of different people over those couple of years. So early on we had Johnny Marks, Anthony Milton, Simon O'Rourke, Mike Kingston, and then it evolved into a more regular lineup with Warwick Donald and Bill Murphy on basses, Damien Stewart on laptop and his father Murray Stewart on keyboards, Ryan Preble played tone generator, Sam Jenks played trumpet, Will Rattray on guitar. There were multiple drummers, so lots of different people. Apologies for all the names that I've left out. And the kind of de facto leader of the group became Nigel Patterson, who played piano and Hammond organ and conducted the group. Nigel's best known as the keyboardist for the Black Seeds, and he also has his own jazz quartet. In 2005 we put together a show for the Wellington Fringe Festival. The shows were quite a success actually, and we won the Best Music Award, so that was a culmination of my time in Wellington before I went overseas.
Okay, so you haven't always lived in Wellington, or where else have you lived?
I was born in Wellington, although I grew up in New Plymouth. But after I finished high school, I moved back to Wellington for a few years and lived there from 1999 to 2005. The turn of the millennium was actually quite an exciting time in Wellington. Not only was Lord of the Rings being filmed and I got to be an extra, but more importantly, the music scene was really interesting at the time. There was a venue called The Space and later Happy, and in more recent years it's become the Pyramid Club, where a lot of avant-garde alternative music happens. On one hand you had the free noise drone kind of stuff. People like Campbell Neal and Anthony Milton, and on the other hand you had the free jazz musicians like Jeff Henderson and Simon O'Rourke, Daniel Bevan. And two of the guys who I got to work with were Paul Winstanley, a bass player who I'd actually met previously in New Plymouth. He's a few years older than me. These days he lives in San Francisco. And Chris O'Connor, the drummer. Chris is one of the top session musicians in New Zealand. He plays with all kinds of different people. And he was also the drummer in one of the first free jazz shows I ever saw. So if I had to pick one track to represent my time in Wellington, I chose Cafes in Conversation. That was recorded in 2001 at Thistle Hall. It's kind of a beat poet long string of words with some chords under it, and it's really brought to life by the bass and drums interplay of Paul and Chris. They were two older mentors for me, and so I was privileged to work with them. And the mixing was done by Joe Corwood, who you may know from the band Little Bushmen. I was quite inspired by the free improvised music and the avant-garde jazz, and tried to blend that with my songwriting. So I was getting away from verse, chorus, verse type structures and into a much more free-flowing style. The backstory of this piece is that it was written while I was waiting to play at an open mic night. The wait became a lot longer than expected, and so the words became quite long for a 3-minute song, but I crammed them all in. It came out on my second album, which was called The Marion Flow, and it also appears on the Electric Yang compilation.
Well, the coconut tree fall to perfection, leaving all of us awake into this splendid castle with a grove metal shack. Bury the fortune tellers, low to the trees. Take out the garbage and add salt. Cafes and conversation, ambience folly. The cocktails tied in coffee beans, and the bellows in fireplace water, and shoes hung out to dry. A crackling smoke to slow mounting fortune, the ice didn't use the springly seeds. The beginning is gone and the going beginning. Weight collapse and small mounting fire tongue, nothing not new with a past not an echo, moving back wide to a folks' identity, shame and a clank put down the dungeon, and coffee beans there too, and hitherto canyon that shuffles them back, leaving in focus consensual guilt, hard to tell what illusion defines all contours, sadness of metal lost in the canyon, defeat tunnel down, and focus lack of a camera to gleam. Escape early warning of and miss all my forests. Had to take announces and put him to bed with sadness, a pillow to smother his head. How still, so Jacob monuments to praise all the fountains. Spanish guitar plays, diffusive in company when he sits a wall that evades all questions, and company follows on, not at all. Getting out now where false impressions blocked off constantly, and mud prostitution a phone call away. Truth telling hard now, this is the end, back again someday. Mumbling back into focus, lives like glass and the world's is liquid. Solidity wallows and senses drowning in glass, crystal fountain scotch on the rocks. A song for his head, and this is contemptible, with orange marshmallow covers laid down from the ceiling and roses of chocolate to bury the gloom. That room full moon, how did you guess? False mysticism and fuzzy perceptions, mounting of distance and awareness of warning, speak not at all. And then temperament follows, and incense the sky and blind pigmentation. Awareness falls, seasons in households lie late in their bloom. Wakefulness follows a dream dying high. Wakefulness follows a dream dying high.
Hey, a question. How did you get into music? Like, where did it all start for you?
The 1990s. I was a teenager in Taranaki. I didn't have much of a musical upbringing, and so I was a late starter. Didn't connect to popular music of the 80s and wasn't really aware of what was going on in the 90s either. I remember when Kurt Cobain died, I thought, where have I heard that name before? Is he a rugby player? I guess rugby was the culture that I was surrounded by, although I didn't relate to that either. But reading and writing was certainly an outlet for me, and I got a guitar when I was about 15 and learned some basic chords and started writing my own songs. My initial inspiration was actually Bob Dylan. When I first heard his early talking blues, it was unlike anything I'd heard before. That nasally voice and the acoustic guitar and harmonica just really resonated with me.
One day I'm gonna be a star, but I can't be bothered to practice my guitar. I can't take you to musical realms beyond words, 'cause all I'm good at doing is strumming chords. I got the can't play for shit, my voice shot to hell blues. I got the white suburbanite, pseudo-hipster intellectual blues. I got the used car salesman running for government blues. I'm gonna blow my harmonica now, I'm gonna suck on it too.
I recorded my first album, Scratched Surface, as a teenager on my dad's reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I burnt it onto a CDR. That was the launch of the fiffdimension label. It came out when I was 19. From there, my tastes evolved, so I progressed from Neil Young to the Velvet Underground to Sonic Youth to John Zorn and Einstürzung Neubauten, and then to the free jazz of Cecil Taylor and Derek Bailey. And then when I got to Wellington, I found that there were New Zealanders doing it for real. Once I became interested in live music, I started seeing local bands like Sticky Filth and Nefarious and 1080 and all of that. Brian Wafer was the guy who organises a lot of gigs in Taranaki. And I got the chance to play as an opening act for them, a little bit incongruous because it was just me with a guitar, and also Peter Jeffries and Chris Knox. My third album was called Mantis Shaped and Worrying, which is one of the little phrases that I'd written down in one of the notebooks that I carried around with me. I'd finished my theatre and film degree and was intermittently employed as a builder's labourer or a film extra or whatever casual work I could get, so I had a bit of time on my hands. I remember reading the entirety of Gravity's Rainbow by Thomas Pynchon and Ulysses by James Joyce. Those were two big heavyweight 20th century modernist novels. William Burroughs and Dylan Thomas were a couple of other influences, so I was into writers as much as musicians. Possibly that was a point of difference. After making a relatively accessible album, The Marian Flow, with the help of professional musicians, for my next trick I doubled down on the more avant-garde elements and took a DIY approach. Rather than alternating between songs and free improv or between acoustic and electric tracks, I aimed to create a fusion. It was recorded on a 4-track, which I'd borrowed from Jeff Henderson. I largely abandoned chords and melody in favour of an improvised atonal approach, but using the possibilities of overdubbing and backwards recording techniques to play with time. I was influenced by Frank Zappa's concept of xenocronous composition. And it was also minimalist in the sense that I had a deliberately restricted sound palette. The album got a notorious bad review in New Zealand Musician magazine. Maybe it was a bit early in my career to go subverting expectations like that. Mantis Shaped and Worrying was a very inward-looking album. Anyway, after painting myself into a corner psychologically and finding that the writing was not coming easily the way it had previously, I started looking for workarounds, which have really been my whole career since, in a way. Collaborating with others is one of the best ways to generate new ideas that I wouldn't come up with on my own, and it's also a good social activity. So in 2003 I started a band for the first time. Mike Kingston and Simon Sweetman were two Wellingtonian guys, approximately my age, who I'd met at gigs. Simon Sweetman's best known as a music writer and critic. Mike is a very accomplished musician who plays in a lot of different bands and different styles. His main current project seems to be Cumbia Blazera. We organised a jam session which happened to fall on the winter solstice day in June 2003. It seemed like we hit it off immediately with a distinctive sound, and so we called the band The Winter. It was improvised music, but maybe closer to a folk rather than a jazz feel. We used a variety of different instruments. In the beginning, Mike played the cello in place of a bass. Simon played a distinctive homemade percussion kit with boxes and saucepan lids and household objects, so it kind of made us a avant-garde skiffle band. The Winter also had an occasional fourth member, Sam Preble, the violinist. Sam recorded his own music under the name Bond Street Bridge. For me, a highlight of working with him was his violin contributions, along with Mike Kingston on cello, to my fourth album, Loose Autumn Moans, the last of my early singer-songwriter albums. It was all acoustic and no overdubs. It was all analogue recordings. I released it on cassette. I played an arch-top acoustic guitar with F-holes for a different sound, and having a string section really brought it alive.
At the beginning of this interview, we played that song, Lake Rotoiti to Fox Glacier, and the reason I love that song is it really, for me, conjured up the feelings of travelling around that part of New Zealand, and your music and your life is kind of it seemed to me, I don't know you that well, but your back catalogue of work seems to be heavily influenced by places you've been to and travelled to. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
By 2005, I was wanting to see more of the world, and Wellington had started to feel claustrophobic. I bought a ticket to Australia and spent the next 6 months in Melbourne. I got a job selling electricity door to door and explored some of the smaller towns in Victoria. Some friends and I also did a road trip from Perth all the way back to Melbourne, 4 days driving in a straight line. I loved the wide open spaces of Australia and the sense of possibilities and the warmer weather and the smell of eucalyptus trees and the strange wildlife. In Melbourne, my music evolved out of necessity. My early singer-songwriter period had run its course, so to compensate for lack of lyric writing and lack of my familiar collaborators, I began to explore field recordings and making beats on the laptop, so bringing in electronica elements, mixing it with performance journalism, and also I didn't have a guitar, so I bought a banjo as an alternative. Banjos stayed with me. It's now the oldest instrument in my collection, and it's travelled with me right around the world. I've been back to Australia several times since, and I lived in Perth in Western Australia from 2012 to 2014. I loved the surf beaches and the pleasant climate, but it became a little bit too isolating after a while, and so I came home. My recordings from Perth came out as a second Aussie album in a wildflower state. But I've gotten to know a few good Aussie musicians. I played gigs with Jim Denley, Clayton Thomas, the Sons of the Seventh Sister. They were a travelling band from the Blue Mountains. Lawrence English, who runs the Liquid Architecture festivals. Joel Stern, Anthony Guerra, a bunch of others. And I should give a shout out to an Aussie couple, Zach and Holly Winterwood, who live here in Featherston and run the Common Ground Gallery. After time in Australia and after a year in the South Island in Nelson, which we talked about at the start, my then partner Sylvie and I in 2007 moved to South Korea and spent a year and a half there teaching English as a second language. We lived in Busan. That's the second largest city in Korea on the south coast. It's about the size of Wellington geographically, but has a population of 5 million. And we took the chance to visit other Asian countries, Japan, Thailand, Vietnam, and even Mongolia, which was a particular highlight. And musically, it really boosted my interest in ethnomusicology, music from other traditions, Korean samul nori drumming, and the stringed instrument, the gayagum, were particular favourite genres. I wasn't really interested in K-pop. I collected field recordings and put together an album called Chuom Yoro, meaning first time around. It was my first time around the world. After travelling throughout the second half of 2008, eventually the savings ran out, and also at home my dad was ill with bowel cancer. It was time to come home. Europe feels like unfinished business. I got back in time for my 30th birthday, and I spent the next couple of years back in Wellington. But I was restless, and although there was still a new iteration of the free improv music scene based around the venue Fred's, the precursor to the Pyramid Club, I felt a sense of reverse culture shock. A younger generation was taking over. Dad died in mid-2010, and I struggled a bit with grief and depression. And the following year I applied for a teaching job in Japan on the JET program. The Tohoku earthquake had caused massive devastation, and so I thought it wouldn't happen, but much to my surprise they offered me a role in Okinawa, the subtropical islands in the far south of Japan, directly south of South Korea. And so I spent 2011-2012 there. Okinawa is not what you may expect from Japan. It has a much more tropical vibe with a strong Hawaiian influence. It also has a unique culture of its own. A particular highlight was the snorkeling. There's an amazing amount of colourful marine life, and I got to swim with turtles. Once again I collected field recordings and made an album, this time in collaboration with Nathan Palmer, known as Nat the Hat. He was a Kiwi expat who I'd met back in Wellington years before. He lives in Saitama, north of Tokyo, and at the conclusion of my year, we spent a week hiking over the northern Japan Alps. I also climbed Mount Fuji. The sight of the sunrise from the top is a memory that'll stay with me. In some ways I regret not staying longer, but I carried on to Perth. The third Asian country that I've developed a connection with as more than just a tourist was Indonesia. I visited there from Perth in 2014, and I was involved in gamelan music throughout the 2010s. Gamelan is the Indonesian word for orchestra, and it's generally played as a percussion ensemble, using gongs and xylophone-like instruments. It's a collective form of music. The more people involved, the better. A lot of the magic comes from the interlocking rhythms and the hypnotic effect that has. And there are parts that beginners can play right through to very complex parts. My first visit was actually to the island of Java, the city of Yogyakarta. Although Java is a Muslim-majority island, it has the largest Buddhist monument in the world, Borobudur, and also a big Hindu temple complex called Prambanan, two of the big landmarks there. I also travelled to Bali, which is a Hindu-majority island, so culturally a complete contrast from Java. And I went to the smaller island Nusa Penida and did some conservation volunteer work. So when I returned home to New Zealand again at the end of 2014, I kept up a connection via the gamelan ensembles, Gamelan Taniwha Jaya and Gamelan Padang Munca in Wellington. Gamelan has a history going back 50 years now in New Zealand, so I was part of a bigger movement. It was also a good discipline for me to play a more structured form of music than my original stuff, and I carried on with it until 2018 when I moved to the Wairarapa, at which point travelling over the Rimutakas for rehearsals on a regular basis became impractical. Also, I'm 6'3" tall, so sitting on the floor to play was beginning to become uncomfortable. I put a collection of my Indonesian and gamelan recordings together as an album called Gamelan Dimensi Kelima, or Gamelan Fifth Dimension.
Yeah, it's interesting, because when you live in the very south of the South Pacific, in the bottom of the world, there's a real desire and drive to go out and see the world, but there's always a part of you that always wants to come home. What happened when you came back?
Coming back to New Zealand and building a life again's kind of been the third act of the story. Along with the gamelan, my first original music collaboration was with Emmett Snake Beings. You featured him in one of your other recent episodes of this show. In a way, he kind of brought me full circle because he was actually an early influence of mine. I'd found one of his CDs in the music shop in New Plymouth when I was a teenager. I met him a few years later, and then at the end of 2014 I was back in New Zealand staying with family in Auckland, and he was living nearby in Huia working on his PhD, so we struck up a collaboration. Highlights from the recording sessions became an album called Ngambang, which is an Indonesian gamelan term for how two instruments are almost but not quite in unison. The idea was that Emmett and I had similar but not identical approaches. It was a fairly eclectic album with a mixture of spoken word, free improv, Indonesian touches, live recordings at the Audio Foundation and at Vitamin S improv sessions, and home recordings at his place in Huia. So that's where the name of the piece Huia Vortex comes from. It's based on a guitar loop by Nathan Palmer, who I'd collaborated with in Japan. Emmett played drums along with it, and I played his bass, which had only one string. I met up again with Emmett at the end of 2019. Listeners to your show will recall that he worked in Fiji for a couple of years as a media studies lecturer, and I met up with him in Suva. Fiji is the first Pacific Island country other than Aotearoa that I visited. It's one of the largest Pacific Island countries, and it's quite diverse. Over 300 different islands, a number of different ethnicities, and nearly half the population are of Indian descent, so it's quite an interesting mix. It does have familiar elements, such as driving on the left, the English language, the Union Jack on the flag, and the obsession with rugby, so it's more similar to New Zealand and Australia, but it's also radically different in a lot of ways. The Melanesian mythology, for example, the shark gods and significance of whales' teeth is quite different from the Polynesian mythology that we're more familiar with here. And although I'm a Pākehā without any Maori ancestry that I'm aware of, I do have family connections to Fiji. So I visited Emmett while he was living there, and we had a couple of recording sessions. Our second album was called Ruasangavulu, which is the number 20 in Fijian. It's less eclectic than the Ngombang album. It has more of its own distinctive tropical psychedelic vibe. It was meant to mark an optimistic start to the new decade, though as we know, things didn't exactly go according to plan. And then once we got into pandemic lockdowns, mixing the Ruasangavulu album gave me something to do. It was nice to imagine being on a beach in Fiji rather than stuck at home during lockdowns. This piece I used as a soundtrack to some film footage that my dad took in Fiji in 1976. He and my mum went there for their honeymoon. I thought having some original music recorded in Fiji would be a nice posthumous collaboration with them. Since 2017, I've lived just over an hour's drive north of Wellington in Featherston, a small town of about 3,000 people on the far side of the Rimutaka Ranges. The main reasons for moving were the opportunity to buy a house and escape the horror of the rental market, and also to be close to family. Speaking of family, my own genealogy has inspired one of my main recent projects, the whole double album, based on the writings of John Middleton Colley, my great-great-grandfather, who came from Scotland in 1858. He spent his later years in Wellington, and he was involved with building the original railroad across the Rimutakas to Featherston, so a real local connection there. As a young man, he had written and self-published a book of poetry called Poems and Lyrics in the English and Scotch dialects, which he published in Boyndie, Bumpshire, in Scotland in 1856. The book's not well known or anything, but it is public domain, and you can find it on Google Books. It was interesting to see a precedent for DIY art in the family, especially since it went so far back. As well as delving into the past, I tried to link it to the future by collaborating with members of my family who are also John Colley's descendants. My nephews play on some tracks, and a couple of other pieces were recorded by my half-sister Megan and my niece Celeste. Between us, we've recorded adaptations of about 30 of the poems so far, mostly in an acoustic folk sort of style. There are 44 poems in the book, some short, only a couple of lines, others are several pages long. Some are written in 19th century standard English, and others are written in Doric Scots, which is the local dialect in Banffshire. It's the region of Scotland to the north between Aberdeen and Inverness. I could probably do a whole other interview on this, or else a master's thesis. To keep it short, I'll give just one example. This track's called Here's a Health to My Cronies. It's a 19th century Scottish drinking song, recorded with my nephew Hans Landon Lane on accordion and backing vocals.
Here's a health to my cronies wherever they reside, whether the side or at a young growing tide. I care not what country or kingdom they claim, they be English or Irish, to me it's the same. Give their hearts to a glass of good whiskey and Clyde, I instantly class them as cronies of mine. Give their hearts to a glass of good whiskey and Clyde, I instantly class them as cronies of mine. proud of his gear. Neither he nor his wealth have charms for us here. Oh, away on foot with his clear-headed cane of a trip through the world, its use may explain. But welcome my cronies wherever you be, to join in this good weekend bumper with me. Welcome my cronies wherever you be, to join in this good weekend bumper with me. I think for the wealth that this world can give, we're nothing more here, so we're nothing to live. The farmer with housing and acres galore has his crosses just now, and they soon count on more. Come here, my cronies, let's kick our care, as long as we've a groat or a shilling to spare. Then come here, my cronies, let's kick our care, as long as we've a groat or a shilling to spare. Come here, my cronies, let's kick our care, as long as we've a groat or a shilling to spare. Come here, my cronies, let's kick our care, as long as we've a groat or a shilling to spare. Come here, my cronies, let's kick our care, as long as we've a groat or a shilling to spare.
By the time I hit my 40s, I started to think maybe I should retire from music. Living on the far side of the Rimatuckers, I'm quite literally over the hill and out of touch with whatever the zeitgeist is doing. But poems and lyrics by John Colley I really felt compelled to make as a contribution to New Zealand music and literature in general. To me, it's quite profound how the project links into the folk elements of my music, and I think it's of genuine historical interest as well as literary value. I've generally avoided playing cover songs, but in this case I'm willing to make an exception. Plus, setting those poems to simple chord progressions gives me plenty of material to play live. It's a whole new repertoire. Like every other genre I tried, I've brought an outsider perspective to Celtic folk. But I have enjoyed trying to recreate 19th century Scotland in an imaginary way by making a musical adaptation of the book.
The dying monarch raised his head and shook his hand and wildly said,
I hear death rattling with his chain. I must depart, I hear the call. I must forsake each gilded hall. Though 'tis terrible to die, I fain would, but I cannot fly. I fain would reach from death that blind. He waves triumphant in his hand. It is useless now, I feel. Weapon, fare thee well. The monarch ceased. Could he dream? Muttered, gazed and shook again. They saw life's dying embers burn. They felt the sting of horror's blade. Before them lay the lifeless form, which once with love and passions warm, the hand stiff which oft had reigned, the war and the prisoner chained. lifeless lump of senseless clay. The stern, despotic monarch. Yeah. Living in a small town, you have to create your own entertainment. I enjoy the wide open landscapes and the 4 distinct seasons, and it's free of the sense of claustrophobia I felt in Wellington. Although a disadvantage of small town life is that opportunities to play original music live are few and far between, although not entirely absent. So as well as the poems and lyrics by John Colley Project and solo improvised music, one of my first collaborations in Featherston was a noise duo with Campbell Neal, although he's since relocated to Whanganui. I also played bass in an electronica duo called the Electrica Zoo, and I did a spoken word collaboration with the painter James Robinson, where I created musical accompaniments to his words. And I've even done a little bit of recording as a duo with Oscar, the family dog. Listeners can find all of this and more on the Fifth Dimension website or Bandcamp page, but as we're running out of time, I'll just mention the most prolific of these collaborations, which is The Troubled Times. Possibly some of your listeners are already familiar with Anthony Milton, but might not have heard what else I do. But I get to shamelessly coattail on Anthony's name recognition. As I mentioned earlier on, Anthony and I knew each other from Wellington in the early 2000s. He released the Winter's first album on the Pseudo Arcana label, and he played in the Ascension band at one point. I was already somewhat familiar with his music. We have a lot of influences in common, but also differences in approach. It keeps it all interesting. One of the things that I like is his strong sense of place and time. There's often a lot of meaning and thought involved in his work. So when he moved to the Wire Upper as well, it was natural to reach out and start a collaboration. I visited him at his house in Masterton, and we've recorded a duo session on the first day of daylight savings in September 2021. In 2022, David Heath, the drummer, joined us. He brings some interesting influences, including jazz and Brazilian music, and he gets an amazing range of sounds out of a beat-up old kit. We meet semi-regularly at Anthony's place in Masterton, and we've collected hours of recordings so far. It's mostly a garage rock trio, literally as we normally play in the garage. Anthony's the main guitarist, but sometimes plays keyboards. I play mostly bass, but sometimes guitar, and recently have started adding clarinet and electronic percussion, and David Heath mostly plays drums.
Hey Dave, so if someone's listening tonight and they're thinking like Fifth Dimension, that's totally me, where should they go to hear some more?
The website is www.fiffdimension.com, and you can find me on YouTube or Bandcamp or wherever else by searching for the keyword Fifth Dimension. The important thing is the spelling, FIFFDIMENSION, or Fifth Dimension.
The other day, I was walking down my driveway, and then my neighbor came up to me and he said, "Hey, neighbor, when's the last time you went to a proper performance cafe?" I said to my neighbor, because I can never remember his name, I said, 90s, it must have been 70s, and there was a revival in the 90s. It was about 91, 92, I reckon, was the last time I went to a performance cafe. And he invited me to a performance cafe here in Dolby City. It's, I can't remember where it is, but there's a performance on somewhere in Dolby. Dolby City Performance Cafe.
Tune your frequency to Radio Dolby 89.6 FM. Twist those dials, twist your mind, and tune in. Batten down the hatches, trim your sails, and point your bow to Radio Dolby.
This is just a message to remind you that this part of the show, the voice of Drew Dolby is going to be replaced by the voice of, no, not replaced, but acted using Dylan Dolby.
Hey, Brother Dolby, thanks for inviting me fishing. Oh, a pleasure, Brother Dolby. I never, you never struck me as a person who was, a fisherman. Well, Dylan, there's lots of things you don't know about me. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but it's nice. It's just a lot of, standing around and waiting for a fish. Well, Dylan, have you ever thought about it from the perspective of the fish? Maybe they've been swimming around waiting for you to dip that bait in the water for all day long. Who knows? I don't fancy, our chances of catching much. The water looks pretty murky to me, and dark, apart from the kind of oil slick rainbow swirls on the surface. Oh, come on, Dylan. No, you need to look at this in a more positive way. You're looking at it from the half glass at the moment. It's beautiful. It's Dolby City, man. I must say I am impressed. I always had you sort of pigeonholed more as a sort of a fish fingers sort of a guy rather than, fresh fish. There's nothing, Brother Dolby, there's nothing wrong with the fish fingers. What on earth is wrong with the fish fingers? I'm not quite sure what the fish around here would eat. I just see a lot of rubbish floating around. I'm not sure I'm actually keen if we catch anything to eat it. Brother Dolby, so why you don't want to eat the fish we catch, but you're criticising me for eating fish fingers? Well, what it's just been recently the World Health Organization has pointed out about the high mercury levels in our seafood these days. But just looking around, like there's dude, you've got to let go of this green thing you've been on for ages. It's driving me crazy. Just go fishing and catch a fish and eat it and enjoy it, or come home to my place. We'll have fish fingers. The nuclear power station just over there has got this discharge going straight into the harbour. I don't feel relaxed. Not quite sure in what the environmental regulations are around that. Yeah, it's this is relaxing. Just you and me, got the waves sloshing against the rocks. Standing here on the wharf. It's a bit cold. I'm enjoying this. It's nice you and me to spend some time together because we're always busy writing songs and doing different things. It's nice to have some man time. Yeah, I appreciate this, Dylan, but it's I don't know why you brought me out here. You're right, it's cold and it's not picturesque. It's not your postcard coastal retreat, but it's Dolby, man. It's great. I love being here with you. But I think you're losing your shit, all this fishing. It's not good for your soul. Just one question. How long do we have to wait before we catch a fish? Oh, can you stop talking about fish? Okay, we're not going to catch any fish here in Dolby City. There's nothing alive in that water. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. I don't know, it's just that I've just watched quite a few, when you said come fishing with me, I watched a few YouTube videos on fishing, and they all seem to catch fish.
I was
pretty
talking
quickly.
metaphorically.
When I went fishing, I was like, let's try and catch some new beats. Let's kind of like do something new, not this.
Oh, look, there's one.
Oh, and it's
Yeah, of course
plastic
it's
bag.
a plastic bag. There's nothing alive here in the Dolby Harbour. Let's go. Wind it up and get out of here, man. Let's go. I've had enough. I'm leaving.
It does
What?
concern me that we're the only ones here, and no one else is fishing.
It's obvious, dude. There's no one fishing because there's no fish. Give up. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Out of here.
Well, look, your rod's going up, bending up and down.
Oh, what? Oh. Oh.
Yo, this goes out for all my little fishy friends. The silly little fishy t-shirts and the Gore-Tex jackets. Jordans on their feet while fishing. Getting wasted drinking DB. Nah. Yo, check it. Leave me alone, yo. Just leave me alone. Trying to have a swim in this little sea foam. Last week caught my little homie called Tone. Pulled him out the water, busted him his little dome. Little Tone ain't never done nothing to you. Set laughed at all you hoodies and your silly little crew. You got a shitty boat, that's a big woohoo. But Tony was my little cousin dude. My little Tony brother didn't need to die, just so all the Christians can have a fish fry. In the Gospel of Luke 5:11, fish were eaten the 5th day of creation. Shut the fuck up. Just get off their backs. Fish are people too, bro. Leave them alone. Dylan, hit it.
I'm a fish. What can I say? I swim around and around this big ocean, and it's an eat or be eaten world. Well, I'm a fish, not a dish. I might smell fishy, but I'm not worth eating. Tell it to the sharks.
Tell it to the hipsters, man.
Yeah, tell it to the sharks.
Just leave those fucking fish alone, man.
Whether you be cousins in love or childless dinosaurs, the next work of exceptional creativity we have for you exclusively on Radio Dolby is one musician in a category all of his own. Why, this guy is not already a household name in hipster garbage land, we shall never know. Brace yourselves and shave your eggs for the one and only Cryptic Quint.
Sugar cubes brought all the way back from the island, the ominous concerning your play-away noise, beach is heard, pause is depressed, click on the alkaline spirit, refuse tuning into a girl where weak signals antenna end, FF super exquisite, rewind, super smoky, heresy cat serves a function, to stop of R20 sugar babe, new ones turn off, tape radio automatically, rush sugar, OPR, hot liberty, pause, dedicated, plastic lip, min, max, turn off, lip, distortion, hot frequency charisma, min, max, lax, dream, auto, record, hot chin wag, heresy cat serves a function, operate the heresy cat, dedicated to noise bleach, heresy cat serves a function for private listening.
It's poetry with Wayne Hill. It's poetry. What more could you want in your life?
I have a date tonight. We like the same things. She likes staying in, as I do. Both like watching a movie or two. She's soft in all the right places. Miss Couch. And I got another one somewhere along the way. Was I actually got married to Miss Couch. Yeah, I married my couch.
Have you got that?
Oh, it'll be in here somewhere, eh? Yeah. You know, actually, I talk about how much material it cost me to actually make her wedding dress. She's a big couch.
Well, thank you for joining us on Radio Dolby 89.6 FM for another evening. Right, so the big thanks, of course, Dave Edwards. Man, that was... I learned so much from actually talking to you, dude. You know, thanks to Shona Thanks to Quint, Mr. Wayne Hill, and thank you, of course, if you bothered to tune in and listen to us here at Radio Dolby 89.6 FM. Our next episode is going to be quite special. It features a man that I've never met in the flesh, but I've known his art for a long time. Anyway, he has promised me he's coming into the studio, and he will do an interview on one condition, that he will only answer one question. So it better be worth it, Quint. Next week, we've got Quint Baker. Make sure you tune in. Song of the week. I managed to sort of salvage a song that Brother Dolby sent me wherever he is in Africa at the moment, and I've added my stuff to it, and it's kind of a beautiful self-tribute actually. It's Mr. Drew Dolby at his absolute best. It's a song called Dolphin Mods. Enjoy.
Don't want to stay out, want to stay in, do my thing. Get drunk and send messages to people I used to care for. Still do. Turn into a bloated corpse, pig poo. The type of person that'll drive you goo-goo. The type of person that will judge your shoes, your pants, your jacket and your knit crew. America Bandits, what FS is that? What FS is that? And is it Gore-Tex? Tex-Mex minus the refried beans, beauty queens in the grandpa sneakers. Busting Dolby out the speakers. I never asked you to.
I never asked you to love me. I never asked you to hate me. I never asked you to see me. I never asked you to hear me. I never asked you to be me. I never asked you to believe me. I never asked you to follow me. I never asked you to listen.
Where do we go from here? Chinese New Year, the year of the dragon. Chase the dragon. Getting life lessons from dwarfs like Joe Rogan. Just imagine. Just imagine. Chain alpha slang code sticking out your gat like you think we don't know. We do. Stuck with your head inside a Chromebook playing Roblox, watching shitty videos on YouTube. Woohoo.
But who are you? But who do you think you are? But who? Hey you. Who do you think you are?
So what kind of life is this? Starting to look like shit, mate. Fuck your phantom tax. Ohio, 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 Ohio. Dolby Brothers are here to get you high, yo.